the soul-stealing song in the dead of night. What if you woke up in the middle of the night to the haunting melody of a song, one that no living person was singing? You hear it faintly at first, as if the wind itself is whispering, teasing you to listen closer. But it's not the wind. No, it's something far darker. It's a tune that creeps under your skin, tugging at your very soul, drawing you into the darkness you never asked to know. And the more you listen, the more you feel your strength slipping away. You feel powerless, like a puppet whose strings are being pulled by something far beyond your understanding. You can't stop yourself from walking towards it, as if the song itself is calling your name, beckoning you to step closer, closer to the edge of sanity. In that moment, you realize you're not the only one hearing it. The melody has claimed others before you. They've all fallen, one by one, into its grip. And now, it's your turn. You can feel your heartbeat echoing in your chest, but it's not enough to drown out the song that's filling your head, your soul, your very being. There's no escape. What if the song isn't just an accident? What if it was never meant to be heard? What if it's a curse passed down through the centuries, waiting for someone foolish enough to listen? Tonight, you're that fool. But here's the twist. This isn't just about you. This is about a secret, buried deep, that no one was ever meant to uncover. A story of vengeance, betrayal, and souls that never found peace. Are you ready to hear the truth? Or will you too become part of the song? This night, the sky was pitch dark. A thick black cloud covered the entire Wuhan Academy, the sky dark and silent, like a giant tornado swallowing the entire academy. The old man on night duty in the duty room turned on the light, wearing a thin coat. He looked out at the pitch-black sky, rubbed his eyes, and shone the flashlight upward. "Oh my God," the old man cried out, his eyes filled with fear, as though something had frightened him. After a long pause, he murmured, "The dark night, the strong wind, blood covering the sky, it must be an omen." It was just the beginning of October, but the wind blew cold and sharp, and the whole campus suddenly became deserted, like an abandoned ancient city. A few crows flew across the sky, landing on the clock at the art building of the school, their caws echoing, like cries of fear, anxiety, helplessness, and collapse. The crows stood on top of the school building, their strange eyes observing every corner of the campus, spreading an aura of death. They stared directly at the girls' dormitory room 411. Inside the room, Sophie Smith couldn't sleep because of the cold. She pulled the blanket off and stood up. At this time, the other girls in the room were fast asleep. Sophie Smith tried to move quietly, afraid of waking them up. What month is it? Why is it so cold? Is it going to rain? Sophie Smith hugged her arms, slowly walking to the balcony window of the dorm. When she pulled the window open, she suddenly heard the sound of a musical instrument. Ding, ding, dong, dong. If she wasn't mistaken, it was probably the sound of a guqin, a traditional Chinese string instrument. As a prominent student in the performing arts department, although guqin was a required course, she was quite familiar with it, since every year there was a guqin performance in the evening, so Sophie Smith didn't find it strange. But at this late hour, who could be playing the guqin? The sound seemed sorrowful, like the sound of a flowing stream, but also like several women whispering, the sound spreading from afar, coming closer and closer to Sophie Smith, causing her to shiver. Sophie Smith felt her head go cold, startled, and screamed, "Is someone there?" There was no response. Everything around was completely silent, and the only sound was the cold wind blowing through the dorm. The sound also vanished. What's going on? Maybe I imagined it. Maybe I'm just too tired. As Sophie Smith turned to go back to sleep, the sound rang out again, persistent and growing more urgent, as if a guqin had been placed on the balcony, and someone was plucking the strings. The guqin sound continued. Ding ding dong dong ding ding dong 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 ding 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 dong dong. Sophie Smith felt her whole body freeze to the bone, so cold that her nerves seemed to be frozen. The scene in the dorm room morphed into ripples, distorted like a giant painting being stretched. The sound was still there, like a magnet pulling her in, but she didn't dare look at it, feeling as though she was in a vortex far scarier than a storm. Perhaps if she turned away, she wouldn't be able to return. She closed her eyes, shook her head, trying to wake up from the nightmare, hoping to escape this misfortune. At that moment, a voice dispelled the sound of the Guqin. "Sophie, why are you standing by the balcony? Come back inside. It's really cold out there." Sophie Smith clearly heard the voice of Hannah Lee from the dorm room and felt like she had been saved. She opened her eyes. A blood-stained figure stood in front of Sophie Smith, wearing the dorm uniform, but the face was horrifying, full of rotting marks, with one eye bulging from the face and a mouth twisted and cracked, but the voice was still clear. "Sophie, why are you standing there in a daze?" Sophie Smith screamed and turned around, heading toward the balcony. At that moment, seemed to be possessed. "Your Majesty, I beg you to spare me." Sophie Smith tilted her head, eyes full of tears, staring into the pitch-black darkness of the balcony. She smiled, gazed into the darkness, and laughed. "Your Majesty, I am ready." Sophie Smith climbed up to the stone railing of the balcony and stood there. The gentle wind blew across her beautiful face, and even in the pitch-black night, her beauty was still visible, a beauty that could captivate anyone. A performing arts student with such a perfect appearance, if she had more time, she would surely have become a shining star admired by many. But her beauty was to end tonight. Hannah Lee stood in front, trying to stop her, but that voice to Sophie Smith seemed from another world, unable to stop her, making her perform strange actions and say bizarre words. Sophie lifted her smooth white skin, giggling sweetly. "Your Majesty, do I look beautiful?" Sophie undid the buttons on her coat like the shedding of a snake's skin. "Disgusting," Sophie Smith said with a sweet smile, rushing toward the building's balcony railing. With a loud thud, Sophie fell to the ground, her body shattered, fresh blood staining the earth around her. However, her face still wore a smile. Two girls stood at the edge of the highest floor of the Y Garden building, singing and reciting ancient royal phrases, comparing themselves to imperial concubines in ancient palaces, completely ignoring the danger they were in. These two girls were Bing Bing and Hannah Lee from dormitory room 411. They wore heavy makeup and elegant clothes, and in the moonlight, they looked alluring and striking. Nearby, a few security guards were slowly approaching. "Such disrespect! You are mere servants, and yet you dare to take another step? The Emperor will have you torn apart by 5 horses and wipe out your entire family." The girl, Bing Bing, furious and enraged, commanded the guards in uniforms to step aside. She waved her hand, causing the guards to be frightened and continually retreating. "Oh, you girls are acting far too deeply," one of the guards said. At the Y Garden building, thousands of faculty and students looked up in worry. "Has the fire brigade arrived yet? Why is it taking so long? Damn it, when there's a major incident, they move slower than turtles. Call them again," the dean shouted, pouring all his anger onto a young faculty member standing next to him. The young faculty member, trembling, took out his phone and dialed 119. "Ah!" At that moment, a girl screamed from afar, her eyes filled with terror as if she had seen the most horrifying scene of her life. The faculty and students present were also terrified by the scream. "Ah, teacher!" The girl grabbed the young faculty member's hand and shook it. The young faculty member, already extremely worried, dropped his phone on the floor in shock, unsure of what to do. The dean, his mind spinning from the situation, looked at the girl and shouted, "What? Don't you see what's happening in the building? Don't you know?" "Yes," the girl sobbed, tears streaming down her face, but her eyes were calm, as if frozen, speaking in agony. "A girl from dormitory room 41 has hanged herself. Oh my!" "What?" Upon hearing this, the dean was so shocked that his eyes seemed about to burst. He stepped back a few paces, his whole body frozen in fear. The surrounding faculty and students also panicked. While everyone was still reeling from this sudden news, the security guard suddenly yelled, "The girl!" But it was too late. Hannah Lee had taken off her clothes and jumped from the top floor, falling several dozen meters. As for Bing Bing, she was slower to undress and didn't manage to jump in time, and several guards quickly grabbed her and pinned her to the ground. "That's mine! Give it back! Give it back!" Bing Bing screamed at the building, looking like a trapped fox. After the forensic doctors and police arrived and conducted an investigation, they discovered that Trung Ding Ding, the girl who hanged herself in dormitory room 401, had traces of fingernails on her, and there were clear signs of a struggle in the dorm. Based on the fingerprints left on the rope, the final conclusion was that Trung Ding Ding had been murdered by her two dorm mates. While Hannah Lee jumped to her death, Bing Bing fell into a state of mental instability, and their deaths became an unsolved mystery. Over time, it turned into a supernatural phenomenon at Y Garden Art Academy. Two girls stood at the edge of the highest floor of the Y Garden building, singing and reciting ancient royal phrases, comparing themselves to imperial concubines in ancient palaces, completely ignoring the danger they were in. These two girls were Bing Bing and Hannah Lee, from dormitory room 411. They wore heavy makeup and elegant clothes, and under the moonlight, they looked alluring and striking. Nearby, a few security guards were slowly approaching. Such disrespect! You are mere servants, and yet you dare to take another step? The Emperor will have you torn apart by 5 horses and wipe out your entire family! Bing Bing, furious and enraged, commanded the guards in uniforms to step aside. She waved her hand, causing the guards to be frightened and continually retreating. "Oh, you girls are acting far too deeply," one of the guards said. At the Y Garden building, thousands of faculty and students looked up in worry. Has the fire brigade arrived yet? Why is it taking so long? Damn it, when there's a major incident, they move slower than turtles. Call them again, the dean shouted, pouring all his anger onto a young faculty member standing next to him. The young faculty member, trembling, took out his phone and dialed 119. Ah! At that moment, a girl screamed from afar, her eyes filled with terror as if she had seen the most horrifying scene of her life. The faculty and students present were also terrified by the scream. Ah! Teacher! The girl grabbed the young faculty member's hand and shook it. The young faculty member, already extremely worried, dropped his phone on the floor in shock, unsure of what to do. The dean, his mind spinning from the situation, looked at the girl and shouted, "What? Don't you see what's happening in the building? Don't you know?" "Yes," the girl sobbed, tears streaming down her face, but her eyes were calm, as if frozen, speaking in agony. "A girl from dormitory room 401 has hanged herself, oh my." "What?" Upon hearing this, the dean was so shocked that his eyes seemed about to burst. He stepped back a few paces, his whole body frozen in fear. The surrounding faculty and students also panicked. While everyone was still reeling from this sudden news, the security guard suddenly yelled, "The girl!" But it was too late. Hannah Lee had taken off her clothes and jumped from the top, falling several dozen meters. As for Bing Bing, she was slower to undress and didn't manage to jump in time, and several guards quickly grabbed her and pinned her to the ground. "That's mine! Give it back! Give it back!" Bing Bing screamed at the building, looking like a trapped fox. After the forensic doctors and police arrived and conducted an investigation, they discovered that Trung Ding Ding, the girl who hanged herself in dormitory room 401, had traces of fingernails on her, and there were clear signs of a struggle in the dorm. Based on the fingerprints left on the rope, the final conclusion was that Trung Ding Ding had been murdered by her two dorm mates. While Hannah Lee jumped to her death, Bing Bing fell into a state of mental instability, and their deaths became an unsolved mystery. Over time, it turned into a supernatural phenomenon at Y Garden Art Academy. The man in front of her looked very young, with a bright forehead, sparkling eyes, and a straight nose. If no one had said he was a teacher, Fanny Man would have really mistaken him for some famous celebrity. Fanny Man noticed that Philip Hunter looked a bit dazed. For a handsome man like him, it would be a lie to say she wasn't captivated. However, the situation was urgent, and it wasn't the right time to make a move. "I've been waiting for you for a long time," Philip Hunter said slowly, with each word carefully pronounced. These words didn't seem particularly special, but when the target was wrong, they became vague and full of insinuation. "Teacher," Fanny Man stammered, her lips twitching. She glanced at the girls around her with sparkling eyes, as if to say, "Didn't they say it's our first time meeting?" Those looks made Fanny Man feel unjustly accused. The next situation was like being pushed into an icy place. Give me your phone number. This was the third thing Philip Hunter said to Fanny Man. That's fast, one of the girls next to them muttered, dissatisfied. Fanny Man tried to stay calm, but couldn't. Her hand was shaking, and she couldn't stop herself from smiling foolishly. But to the others, her smile seemed unpleasant, as though she was smiling because she was about to become a princess. Some girls looked at her with hatred, biting their lips and furrowing their brows, glaring at Fanny Man. A month ago, Philip Hunter drove a luxury car to this art school, attracting the attention of the entire school, not because of his wealth, but because of his accomplishments. Philip Hunter, hailed as a genius painter of the 21st century, was only 23 years old when he came to this small school to teach art. Reporters immediately rushed to cover the story, and now his name was a hot search everyone knew. The strangest thing was that no one could find any information about his family background. Not even the police had any records of him, only knowing about the events after he became a famous artist. His mystery was apparent. Because he was handsome, young, and talented, in a school full of beautiful girls, he was even more adored by them. Anyone who came to this school hoped to succeed in the future, especially the girls in the drama department, who saw meeting someone as talented as him as finding a treasure, hoping that if they stayed close, they might one day catch his attention and become a phoenix. However, things didn't go as the girls expected. A figure like Fanny Man appeared, throwing the harem into complete chaos. Now, Fanny Man had no choice but to implement a step-by-step strategy, not allowing herself to be thrown off balance by the power of her opponent. It was just a phone number, after all. The teacher cared about the student's safety. Giving a contact information wasn't a big deal, right? Why were the girls looking at me like that? Silently groaned, feeling like she had walked into the wrong door today. She quickly gave a string of numbers, hoping to leave as soon as possible. 1589. Philip Hunter slowly took out his phone, entered Fanny Man's number, and saved the name, Man. The name Man was noted by Philip Hunter right in front of all the girls around, including Fanny Man. The situation immediately became tense. A battle was about to begin. Fanny Man saw the name that had accompanied her for 19 years and felt like she was about to cry. She really wanted to change her name, get plastic surgery, or even change schools. Although Fanny Man usually avoided crowds, at this moment the crowd surrounded her. How unlucky. She was about to become a target. Give me your phone. I need to borrow it for a moment. Philip Hunter reached his hand towards Fanny Man. Fanny Man didn't know what to do, but she had no strength to resist anymore. Her hand uncontrollably grabbed her silver phone from her bag and handed it to Philip Hunter. Philip Hunter took the phone seriously and sat there thinking for 5 minutes, as if deciding something important. The girls around were like lab rats, watching him, including Fanny Man. This was the only sound that came from Philip Hunter's throat, and then his finger quickly touched the screen of the silver phone. He entered the phone number, 1585, saved the name, Hunter. The observers were all stunned, and Fanny Man was immediately frozen in place. A small girl next to her bit whispering to her, "You are really cruel." The other girls looked at her with terrifying eyes. If looks could kill, would have already been dead. It felt like she wanted to die. Something so big had just happened. How would she ever live after this? At this moment, Fanny Man just wanted to finish the process as quickly as possible and get out of this office because she felt like she was about to suffocate. "Teacher, I want to go to the dorm early to get settled in. It's time for tuition payment, right?" said the final words almost in a whisper, fearing that she would upset the girls next to her. The young, handsome man, who seemed to be only 12 or 13 years old, despite being rare and incredibly talented, couldn't fit in the small room she had now. She just hoped that he could help her escape her misery as soon as possible. Philip Hunter nodded, as if waking up from a trance, then returned the phone to Fanny Man. The tuition payment process was no longer as awkward as before. Fanny Man paid and sighed with relief, quickly asking, "Teacher, can you tell me which dorm room I'm assigned to?" At this point, Philip Hunter flipped through the documents in his hand and discovered that the art department's dormitory was already full. This put him in a difficult position. "Miss Chang, Miss Lee, your dormitory still has an available room. It seems that new student Fanny Man from our department will have to stay with you," asked the two female teachers in the office. "Yes, yes," one female teacher said excitedly. "Our drama department's dorm still has one room left. I wonder, would you like to have this new student stay with you?" After speaking, she cautiously looked around and glanced at Philip Hunter. "Which room is that?" Philip Hunter's face showed coldness, lowering his head slightly, not allowing anyone to see his current expression. "Room 411. "Ah, what? Room 411? One of the girls immediately shouted, her face full of fear. "No, teacher, you can't let this new student stay in that room. That room is haunted. Yes, anyone who stays there will die. No one survives. If that room opens, I'll drop out." The girls were all agitated, their faces flushed and their ears heated up. Some of the teachers also shook their heads in frustration and continued working. Only one person, very curious about the room, was Fanny Man. How could a dormitory room scare these princesses so much? It seemed like a place that couldn't be violated, making it the perfect place for her to hide. The drama department head had anticipated this reaction, so she already had a response ready, saying, "That dormitory room has been opened, and currently there are 3 girls staying in it." "What? It's already open?" One girl, skinny and frail, hearing this news, immediately collapsed, leaning into the arms of another girl behind her. "Does the school even care about the life and death of its students?" No, teacher. You are the drama department head. You can't let students stay in that room." The teacher sighed and said, "This is not something I can decide. Everything is a directive from the higher-ups in the school. I'm just the department head. Eyes." That's right. In university, unlike in high school, the department head only holds a titular position and doesn't have much power. Even with good intentions, there's not much that can be done. The real people with power are the academic advisors, department heads, and high-level school leaders. So the teacher couldn't be blamed for being powerless. It could only be said that she didn't have authority. Let's go. Let's go talk to the school leaders to explain. Does the school care about the life and death of its students? A group of girls angrily and noisily left the office. The dorm room had a history of death, and if it were someone else, they would certainly be too scared to stay there. But for Fanny Man, it no longer seemed scary. Having gone through so many challenges and lost 2 of her most important family members, she had grown stronger than most. She just wanted to find a quiet place to focus on her art studies. "Teacher, I want to stay in that dorm room," Fanny Man said seriously. When Fanny Man heard that she wanted to stay in dorm room 411, Philip Hunter wasn't particularly surprised. He just propped his chin and sat silently, seemingly pondering something. He had never heard of the events that occurred in room 411, but it seemed like he didn't really care. What mattered to him more at that moment was the student standing before him. "Do you really want to stay in that room?" Philip Hunter asked. "Yes, sir," Fanny Man nodded. A teacher beside them chuckled and said to Fanny Man, "You've heard the reactions of the other girls about that room, right? It's rumored that, to put it simply, it's haunted." Upon hearing this, Fanny wanted to laugh, but she refrained, not wanting to laugh in front of the teacher. A teacher like him, well-educated, how could he easily believe in such superstitions? She didn't believe in ghosts and thought that, by this logic, no place would be livable. However, things didn't go as Fanny Man imagined. The teacher looked at her with a slight look of contempt and continued, "It's not as simple as you think. In that room, 3 people died, 1 went insane, and you could say the whole group was wiped out." "3 people died!" Fanny Man's head suddenly went blank, her face showing a trace of fear, but the feeling quickly faded. She thought for a moment and figured that the girls might have been murdered. But why was it just this one dorm room that had such events? Either way, she didn't believe in ghosts, and she certainly didn't believe the dormitory was haunted. The teacher looked at a few other teachers around, seemingly wanting to embellish the story, but fearing that if he went too far, he would be criticized by the leadership. So he said, "This happened 4 years ago. I'm not trying to scare you, just a precaution. If the school really doesn't have any more available rooms, maybe staying outside would be safer. I've decided to stay in that room. As you said, it happened 4 years ago. I don't think the culprit will return to commit another crime." The teacher shrugged, pretending to not care, but didn't reveal any further strange events that had happened in room 411. Only after experiencing it for herself would Fanny Man realize that the girls in that room were not murdered by anyone else. If there was anyone to blame, it would be one of the girls themselves. Two jumped to their deaths, one went insane, and the last one was hanged by her own roommate. "Teacher, I'll stay in that room." Philip Hunter understood her intention and then turned to the young female teacher from the drama department and said, "Miss Chang, could you arrange a dormitory for Fanny Man?" The female teacher appeared to be in her early 30s. Both her appearance and temperament were beautiful and graceful, living up to her reputation as the drama department head. Philip Hunter's words seemed to bring her 100-fold comfort, but it was a pity that she could only harbor secret feelings, for young grass is unlikely to catch the eye of the old cow. It's just a registration, nothing complicated. The teacher took a bunch of keys out of the drawer and handed them to Fanny Man. "Here, take them." Fanny Man took the bunch of keys, said goodbye to the teachers in the office, and immediately rushed to the girls' dormitory. Before leaving, the department head told Fanny Man that the dormitory for the drama department was much more spacious than the others, especially the room she would be staying in, which was called the presidential room. There was only one such room in the entire school, located on the 3rd floor of Building 4 in the girls' dormitory, the room on the left corner. It was specially prepared for famous stars, and only drama department students could enjoy this privilege. When Fanny Man reached the 3rd floor of Building 4, she heard a commotion with many students gathered around the hallway of that room, not knowing what they were arguing about. Fanny Man approached and saw a few girls standing in front of the door, blocking the new students from entering. The door to room 411 was still closed, but it was much larger than the other rooms and decorated in a luxurious European style, very eye-catching. Saw 3 girls inside the room, arguing with those standing in front of the door, none of them yielding. Those 3 girls were her future roommates. "What's the argument about? If you don't want to study, just go home." Just then, a hoarse female voice echoed down the hallway. A middle-aged woman with an angry expression rushed in, shouting, "These new students want to rebel? What's with blocking the dorm room door? Do you want to sleep in the hallway?" This middle-aged woman was the manager of the dormitory building. With a fiery temper and nearing 50 years old but still unmarried, the school had anticipated that reopening room 411 could cause trouble, so they specifically assigned her from another dormitory to manage the situation. As soon as the dormitory manager appeared, the noise in the hallway immediately quieted down. The girls blocking the door to the dormitory seemed frightened and gradually stepped aside. "Don't let me hear any more noise. If I do, you'll regret it." The manager coldly swept her gaze over both sides and then said to the 3 girls pulling their luggage, "You may enter the room now." After speaking, she turned and walked back to her office. 2 of the 3 girls quickly approached to pull open the door, while the 3rd girl was still holding a mirror, calmly admiring her reflection. Among the 3, she seemed the most composed, focusing solely on adjusting small details on her face without paying attention to the argument. As soon as the door was opened, a few black crows suddenly flew out from inside the room. Their harsh, croaky calls made anyone who heard them wince. The crows flew out of the dormitory, leaving behind a terrifying silence. The 2 girls who opened the door jumped back in shock, but just when everyone thought all the crows had flown out, another one suddenly flew from inside. Fanny Man, who was pulling her luggage into the room, noticed that this crow was different from the others. Its eyes were red as blood, like 2 drops of blood on its face. Unlike the others, This crow didn't fly outside, but charged straight toward a girl standing near the door. Its sharp claws, like knives, scratched the pale arm of the girl. Ah! The girl, one of the two who had opened the door, was now clutching her arm, tears streaming down as blood started to flow from the wound. Those around could only stand by and watch. No one dared to step forward to help chase the crow away. Even the two friends of the injured girl were frozen in shock, unsure of what to do. Fanny Mann saw the urgency of the situation and, without hesitation, placed her luggage down and grabbed her handbag to strike the crow. Thud! The crow, struck by Fanny Mann, fell to the ground. It let out a cry full of hatred, its red eyes glaring at her with malice before it flapped its wings and flew out of the dormitory. Fanny Mann shivered as she recalled the crow's gaze. Its eyes were so strange, full of murderous intent, making her feel deep fear in her heart. Just one pair of eyes could exude such a powerful murderous aura. That was truly a terrifying sensation. Luckily, Fanny Mann acted in time, so the situation didn't escalate. The girl was only scratched by the crow on her hand, and her face and other parts were unharmed. "Are you okay?" Picked up a black feather that had fallen on the girl's head and helped her up. "Thank you for saving me," the girl said, her eyes brimming with tears, still shaken by what had just happened. "Sophie Smith!" A girl standing nearby quickly grabbed her friend's hand and worriedly asked, "Are you okay? You scared me half to death." This girl was Sophie Smith's companion, named Hannah Lee. The previous incident had startled her so much that she didn't know how to help her friend. "I'm fine." The girl named Sophie Smith lowered her head, her voice a little sad with a hint of sobbing, looking at the wound on her fair wrist. She felt an instinctive sense of worry. Then she turned to Fanny Mann. "I'm so glad you helped." "Helping each other as classmates is the right thing to do," Fanny Mann replied. "Plus, it seems like we'll be roommates too." "Are you assigned to room 411 too?" Hannah Lee asked, surprised. "Yes." Fanny Mann nodded with a smile. "My name is Fanny Mann. I look forward to your help from now on." Fanny Mann, Sophie Smith, heard that Fanny Mann was also a roommate. The tears in her eyes finally stopped, and she slowly walked up to Fanny Mann, leaning against her like a little kitten looking for a place to rest. Annie Mann was a little embarrassed, but didn't push Sophie Smith away. She gently stroked Sophie Smith's hair and whispered, "It's okay, you're fine." At this moment, the girls who had been frightened before had now calmed down. Seeing Sophie Smith's condition, they not only lacked empathy, but began to mock her. "See, I told you the room was haunted. Now it's obvious. Something happened as soon as we got here. Who knows what will happen next?" The crow earlier was definitely not a good omen. It represents death. Anyone who gets touched by it is doomed. Who doesn't know the danger? Daring to stay in that haunted room. Now you're getting what's coming to you. Serves you right. The girls began to gossip and criticize Sophie Smith and her group, their eyes full of disdain, mocking and gloating, thinking Sophie Smith had encountered misfortune. Slap! At that moment, the foot girl from room 411, Victoria Nguyen, suddenly stood up and slapped one of the mocking girls hard across the face. She angrily said, "I hate girls like you, who only know how to badmouth others. Aren't you ashamed? You dare slap me?" The girl who was slapped hugged her cheek, tears welling up, and whispered, "I'll tell my father and see if you can live peacefully." "Mph," Vic snorted coldly, staring at the girl, ignoring her. The hallway suddenly became lively when a handsome young man with glossy hair, holding a bouquet of roses, hurried over. Behind him, a few other guys were carrying gift bags, out of breath. It seemed like some rich young master had come to flirt with one of the girls here. The sight immediately caused a stir among the other female students, each hoping to have a boyfriend like that. "Victoria Nguyen!" As soon as the young man saw Victoria Nguyen, he immediately called out loudly, as if afraid no one would recognize him. He slowly adjusted his gelled hair, fixed his clothes, and then slowly walked up to Victoria Nguyen, smiling obsequiously. "Victoria Nguyen, knowing you're at school today, I've prepared this to welcome you. Here, I've picked out this bouquet of roses just for you." Victoria Nguyen, already annoyed, didn't pay attention to the young man, just turned her face away and said nothing, The young man stood there holding the bouquet, awkwardly hanging in the air, his face becoming flustered and giving a forced smile. He wondered, am I not perfect today, or is there something wrong? Looking around, he then noticed the tense atmosphere. The girls, who usually surrounded him and cheered for him, now seemed to be standing on the verge of a fierce battle. Looking more closely, he saw a girl angrily glaring at his goddess, Victoria Nguyen. Immediately, he became furious, shouting, "Who dared to piss off Victoria Nguyen?" The girl who was shouted at was scared and hid behind her friends, muttering, "She slapped me first." Everyone knew that this young man was Dong Jichang, a wealthy heir in school who relied on his family background to stir up trouble. He usually spoiled the girls, but today he was enraged because of Victoria Nguyen. "Who do you think you are, daring to upset Miss Victoria? Want to die?" Dong Jichang cursed, then turned to Victoria Nguyen with a respectful look. "Victoria Nguyen, look, I've helped you vent your anger. Don't be mad anymore. Don't bother with people like her." Victoria smiled coldly, looking at the girl who had been so confident earlier, now running away like a lost dog. She then swayed her graceful figure toward the room and didn't forget to say, too, "Help me bring in my luggage." "Yes," replied eagerly, quickly pulling the luggage. But when he saw the number 411 on the door, his face immediately turned fearful, hesitating to stop. "Why are you staying in this room? This is room 411. Looking at Dong Xian's frightened expression, seeing him talking about ghosts, and immediately showed her displeasure. She then said sternly to Dong Xiqian, "A boy like you believes in ghosts? If you mention it again, you'll regret it." Dong Xiqian realized that Victorian was truly angry and quickly swallowed his words, hastily replying, "You're right, it's just nonsense. It was just my foolish thoughts. Don't pay attention to it." Although he said that, Dongjiang still felt a little fearful, unable to hide his dread of room 411. Fanny Man and her roommates brought their luggage into room 411. The room was quite spacious, divided into 4 areas: a workspace, a bedroom, a small living room, and a balcony. Each area had a single bed, a wardrobe, and a vanity table. 2 stainless steel windows were wide open, letting in the cool evening breeze, making the air in the room feel unusually fresh. It seemed like the wall painters had just finished and left the windows open to let the paint smell dissipate quickly. That might explain why the crows had taken the opportunity to fly in, causing the earlier incident. However, what struck Fanny Man as strange was how clean the room was. There wasn't a single feather in it. It was hard to imagine that a flock of crows had been there. Or had they only appeared in her imagination? Feeling mentally exhausted after a long day of travel, Fanny Man quickly unpacked her luggage and lay down to rest. Later in the evening, Hannah Lee and Sophie Smith came back from outside and brought her some food, helping her escape the headache from hunger. Victoria and Gwen came back very late. By then, Fanny Man had already fallen asleep. The sudden beam of light from the door startled her, and she wasn't used to the brightness. "Victoria, Gwen? Why are you back so late? Aren't you going to sleep?" "Wait a second, I'm sorry. Did I wake you?" Victorian was sitting at the vanity, holding a wooden comb to comb her hair. Her hair was long and smooth, and the comb seemed to glide effortlessly through it without any force required. Tonight, Victorian was wearing a form-fitting long dress and delicate high heels, holding the wooden comb. Fans squinted at her figure, finding her outfit particularly alluring but somewhat inappropriate. It was almost like a flower girl. Fanny Man wasn't sure why such a term popped into her mind. "Fanny Man, do you think I look beautiful tonight?" Victoria Gwen asked as she combed her hair, one hand gently sweeping through her hair, the other holding the comb with long red painted nails that glistened under the light. "Beautiful," Fanny Man replied, feeling that Victoria Nguyen seemed to be affected by something. It was odd for her to ask another girl if she was beautiful. It felt strange, but Fanny Man reluctantly responded. Victorian was indeed very beautiful. Among girls her age, she possessed rare beauty and charm, a level of maturity. It was no surprise that every guy who met her would fall for her, But Fanny Man was a girl. You're lying! Victorian raised her voice. You answered without even looking at me. Realized that Victorian Gwen was really angry, even angrier than earlier, with a hint of resentment. Earlier, Fanny Man had not looked directly at Victorian Gwen when answering because she was so tired, and the room's light made her think it was already morning. Her eyelids kept closing, and she just wanted to lie down and sleep. How could Victoria Gwen know that she didn't look her in the eyes when answering? Was it through the reflection in the mirror? Fanny Man thought for a moment, then looked at the mirror, realizing that from this angle, Victoria Gwen clearly could not see her through the mirror, let alone her eyes. Sat up, and from this angle, she could see Victoria Gwen through the vanity mirror. But when looking into the mirror, why could she only see Victoria Gwen's shiny black hair and not her face? The soul-stealing song in the dead of night. What if you woke up in the middle of the night to the haunting melody of a song, one that no living person was singing? You hear it faintly at first, as if the wind itself is whispering, teasing you to listen closer. But it's not the wind. No, it's something far darker. It's a tune that creeps under your skin, tugging at your very soul, drawing you into the darkness you never asked to know. And the more you listen, the more you feel your strength slipping away. You feel powerless, like a puppet whose strings are being pulled by something far beyond your understanding. You can't stop yourself from walking towards it, as if the song itself is calling your name, beckoning you to step closer, closer to the edge of sanity. In that moment, you realize you're not the only one hearing it. The melody has claimed others before you. They've all fallen, one by one, into its grip. And now, it's your turn. You can feel your heartbeat echoing in your chest, but it's not enough to drown out the song that's filling your head, your soul, your very being. There's no escape. What if the song isn't just an accident? What if it was never meant to be heard? What if it's a curse passed down through the centuries, waiting for someone foolish enough to listen? Tonight, you're that fool. But here's the twist. This isn't just about you. This is about a secret, buried deep, that no one was ever meant to uncover. A story of vengeance, betrayal, and souls that never found peace. Are you ready to hear the truth? Or will you too become part of the song? This hook is designed to immediately draw the viewer into the dark, eerie atmosphere of the story, with an escalating sense of dread and mystery, while hinting at the twist and deeper secrets to unfold, ensuring viewers stay engaged through the whole video. Fanny Man rubbed her eyes, wearing slippers, and squinted as she was about to take a closer look at Victoria Gwen. But when she looked into the mirror on the vanity, she could only see Victoria Gwen's hair, even though Victoria Gwen was facing the vanity directly. Why can I only see the hair? Has Victoria combed her hair to cover her face? Why can't I see your face? Fanny Man asked carefully, afraid that it might anger Victoria Gwen again. Upon hearing this, Victoria Gwen giggled and replied, Fanny Man, are you joking? I'm facing you. How can you not see my face? I can even tell the type of slippers you're wearing. They're green, so what do you think? Fanny Man was taken aback. She could only see her slippers through the mirror when it was tilted downwards. It made her feel unbelievable. She continued, How could you see my slippers through the vanity mirror? Victoria Gwen smiled and said, Fanny Man, what's wrong with you? How could you see slippers through a mirror? Unless your eyes are on your head? Felt as if a thunderbolt had struck her. Her whole body trembled, and her hands became ice cold. Eyes on my head? Was facing away from her, wasn't she? She had to turn around, so her eyes must have been too. How could she say my eyes are on my head? This doesn't make sense. Am I hallucinating? Fanny Man felt her perception of reality starting to distort. What's going on? Ha ha! At this moment, Victoria Gwen suddenly burst into eerie laughter, full of malice, mocking Fanny Man. Then she suddenly said, Even though I don't want anyone to see my face at night, if you really want to, I'll show you. After all, we're roommates. Victoria Gwen held the comb in one hand, still combing her shiny black hair, while the other hand began to separate her hair at the middle. Her hand twisted in a way that seemed almost impossible. Was that still the hand of a human? Or was it a ghost? The hair gradually parted, revealing half of a face without eyes, eyebrows, nose, or mouth. The spots where the features should have been were just lumps, looking like a face covered with a cloth, breathing heavily. Fresh blood oozed from the empty eye sockets. Ah! Fanny Mance screamed in horror, falling backward and trembling as she wrapped herself in the blanket, her whole body shaking uncontrollably. "Tell me, do you think I'm beautiful now?" Victoria Gwynn asked, stepping closer to Fanny Man. What was terrifying was that she was walking backward, taking steps on her heels. "No, no." Shook her head wildly, her head spinning as if it were about to explode. "Now, do you think I'm beautiful?" Victoria Gwynn shouted, then laughed maniacally, trembling with laughter. She sat down next to Fanny Man, lightly patting her trembling shoulder, and said, "I forgot. You always thought you were more beautiful and alluring than me. Look at me." Victoria Gwynn held up a mirror, positioning it in front of Fanny Man. At this point, Fanny Man was too terrified to look anymore, but Victoria Gwynn wouldn't let her avoid it. She grabbed Fanny Man's hair and forced her to look into the mirror. "Ah!" Fanny Man panicked, trying to pull her hair away from Victoria Gwynn's hand. In the mirror, she saw herself looking just like Victoria Gwynn. No eyebrows, no eyes, no nose, no mouth, but fresh red blood flowing from the empty eye sockets. "Now you see yourself, don't you? Do you still think you're more beautiful than me?" Victoria Gwynn growled, then squeezed Fanny Man's neck like a hungry wolf, howling, even scarier than a wolf. "I am the most beautiful. How dare you compare with me? Ha ha ha! Go die, die, ha ha ha!" Fanny Man's neck was squeezed so tightly that she felt she couldn't breathe. Her vision gradually blurred and everything around her grew dark. But Fanny Man still thought, "I haven't fallen in love yet. I haven't lived this life to the fullest. And most importantly, I don't want to leave this world alone." At that moment, Fanny Man didn't care if the thing in front of her was Victoria Gwynn or some kind of demon. As long as she was still alive, she had to fight back. Victoria Gwynn's hands were like two iron pincers gripping Fanny Man's neck. Fanny Man desperately tried to break free, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't break free, as if the two arms were rusted. Fanny Man felt Victoria Gwynn's hands as cold as ice, the chills spreading throughout her body. When she saw Fanny Man daring to fight back, Victoria Gwynn was somewhat surprised. She didn't expect Fanny Man to still have the courage to resist at this moment. Shouldn't she be too scared to move? But in just a moment, Victoria Gwynn began to laugh again, letting out eerie sounds. "You can't escape! You can't escape!" Fanny Man felt her throat constricting, the last bit of light slowly disappearing from her sight, and darkness began to engulf her whole world. "Ha!" Fanny Man suddenly opened her eyes, taking a deep breath as if she had just escaped the brink of death. It turned out to be just a dream, but the dream felt so real. She could clearly feel the pain, and the images in the dream were vivid, as though everything was really happening. At this moment, Fanny Man was drenched in sweat, the sweat soaking into her skin, feeling incredibly uncomfortable. She also felt an overwhelming suffocation. Although it was September, the room clearly had air conditioning. Had Sophie and the others forgotten to turn it on, or was it broken? As she thought about this, her head suddenly throbbed with a sharp thud, as if she had just bumped into something made of wood. Could it be the bunk bed? No, that can't be. Fanny Man quickly dismissed that possibility. She clearly remembered that room 401 had only single beds, no bunk beds. If it wasn't the bunk bed, then what was it? Fanny Man realized her breath was becoming more rapid, unsure whether it was because of suffocation or something else. She reached out with her hands and started feeling around. Panicked, she discovered she was surrounded by a tight, closed space. She knocked on the walls. Everything was made of wood. Could she be locked in a wooden box? Fanny Man began to panic, feeling a cold chill run down her spine as she reached a terrifying conclusion. She was locked in a coffin. Though Fanny Man didn't want to believe it, she confirmed her suspicion when she kicked the side with all her might. Could it not have been a dream? Had she really been strangled to death by Victoria Gwynn and then sealed in a coffin and buried underground? The cold sensation spread from her feet up to her head, and fear immediately overwhelmed her, like an invisible knife cutting into her life. She felt the horror and helplessness in a place where no one could find her. This was the first time Fanny Mann had felt fear, as if standing on the edge of hell. Had she really died? Was she truly in a coffin? She asked herself. It couldn't be. Even in death, she couldn't be buried in a coffin. People nowadays usually cremate the body, leaving only ashes. That meant she hadn't died. Impossible. Fanny Mann gathered all her strength to push the coffin lid. The lid was very heavy, but she realized it wasn't nailed shut, so it could be pushed open. Just that it required a lot of strength to move it. With a heavy thud, the lid was kicked off and fell to the ground. Fanny Mann sat up quickly and realized she was indeed locked in a black wooden coffin, which was placed right in room 411. At this moment, the room was very dark, but thanks to the moonlight streaming through the window, Fanny Mann noticed there were 3 other black coffins in the room, neatly placed where the beds used to be. What was going on? Why were there coffins in the bedroom? And why was she locked in one? Could all of this be the doing of Victoria Nguyen? Fanny Mann shook her head, pushing that thought aside and focusing on a more terrifying realization. There were 3 other coffins in the room, meaning there were 3 other people locked inside, not just her. Surely it was Sophie, Hannah, and Victoria Nguyen. At that moment, Fanny Mann didn't dare to hesitate any longer. She rushed to one of the coffins, remembering that this spot had been Sophie's bed. If she wasn't mistaken, the person inside was Sophie. Using all her strength, Fanny Mann opened the coffin lid and, to her horror, found Sophie inside. Her deep dimples were still visible, looking so adorable, but her face was pale, as though covered with thick powder. The strange thing was that Sophie didn't have a single drop of sweat on her body. In such a sealed coffin, Fanny Mann was still alive, but Sophie was completely stiff, like a wax statue. Fanny Mann slowly reached out and gently touched Sophie's arm. Sophie's skin was cold, but it still had the sensation of someone who had just passed away. From the first time Fanny Mann saw Sophie, she had a bad feeling, and now, as her hand gradually moved towards Sophie's body, she confirmed it. The heartbeat, the breath, everything had stopped. No! Fanny Mann screamed in panic, collapsing to the ground, clutching her head, unable to fathom the images she had just seen. She was terrified beyond measure, witnessing a living being disappearing right before her eyes so suddenly, without any warning. Who had harmed her? Fanny Mann felt as though she was bound by thousands of invisible ropes, so tense that her mind couldn't stay calm. The feeling was like the pain of losing a loved one years ago, an endless darkness rushing in, with no one to free her from this hell. She wanted to cry so badly, but then she immediately remembered there were still 2 people in the room, Hannah and Victoria Nguyen. Hesitating for a moment, Fanny Mann recalled Victoria Nguyen's strange and frightening gaze earlier and decided to first open Hannah's coffin, hoping that she was still alive. But once again, reality hit her hard because inside the black coffin, Hannah, just like Sophie, was completely cold and lifeless. Creak. As Fanny Mann was sinking into deep sorrow, the lid of Victoria Nguyen's coffin suddenly cracked open, and a thin, bony hand, like a dry bamboo branch, emerged. Fanny Mann held her breath, staring at the hand that had emerged from the coffin, its fingers thin and bone-white. She didn't dare to help open the coffin lid, her instinct telling her that the person inside was not the Victoria Nguyen she knew. Creak! The hand turned a full 360 degrees, gripping the lid of the coffin and pushing it aside forcefully. Bang! The heavy lid fell to the floor. Just then a head popped out from the coffin, its hair messy and its face still unclear. Is it Victoria Nguyen? Fanny Mann swallowed nervously and asked cautiously. Yes! The voice came out softly, and it was Victoria Nguyen's voice. Fanny Mann immediately felt a surge of panic, about to run to her. But suddenly, Victoria Nguyen's head tilted to the side, like a broken branch, revealing half of her terrifying face. Fanny Mann could never forget that face. There were no eyebrows, no eyes, no nose, no mouth, and there was a streak of fresh blood, along with a strangely sunken mouth that made it hard for her to breathe. Her stomach churned, and a wave of nausea flooded over her. She thought she was going to vomit. You're still not dead, Victoria Nguyen said coldly. Then let me make sure you die again. Fanny Mann felt her hair stand on end and didn't dare hesitate for another second. She immediately ran for her life out of room 411. She banged on every door along the corridor, but no room responded, and she didn't hear any sounds from inside any of the rooms. Behind her, Victoria Nguyen was slowly advancing toward her. Fanny Mann turned and ran toward the end of the corridor, but the hallway, which wasn't long, now seemed endless. A bright moon hung in the sky, its cold, shimmering light surrounding it, like gentle waves spreading across the dark sky. The silver beam from above shone down, passing through the windows of the dormitory rooms and reflecting off the glass, making the entire hallway glow brightly. Fanny Mann ran down the hallway, trying to reach the stairs to escape, but it seemed like with each step she took, the hallway grew longer, pulling her back by 30 feet. She felt trapped in a loop. No matter how fast she ran, she couldn't break out of this cycle. Unless she jumped straight out the window, but that would mean suicide from dozens of meters high. What in the world was happening? Sweat poured down Fanny Mann's body like a stream, her shirt sticking to her skin. Under the moonlight, her figure was outlined with soft curves. She wiped the sweat from her face, like feeling the coldness, unsure whether it was from fear or exhaustion. Right now, she just wanted to escape the dark shadow of Victoria Nguyen behind her. Victoria Nguyen, with hands as dry as bones, slowly advanced towards her, while Fanny Mann's sweat dripped down her forehead from the tension. She feared being caught by Victoria Nguyen, afraid of the excruciating feeling of struggling at the edge of life and death. It was a pain that was unbearable, like a sharp knife digging deep into her heart. Ha! Victoria Nguyen let out eerie laughter, echoing in Fanny Mann's ears like a haunting melody, trapped the listener in a spell. She held a hairbrush tightly, brushing her long black hair, tilting her head at a 45-degree angle. Her face was terrifying. No eyebrows, no eyes, no nose, no mouth. She was walking backward with her high heels, but moving by the tip of the heel, creating strange sounds that echoed in the air. As she passed, windows and walls began to ooze thick, bubbling blood. Cracks appeared in the walls, from which countless strands of black hair emerged, floating in the air. The hair looked like monstrous tentacles or snakes flicking their tongues, sending shivers down anyone's spine. At that moment, a sound of an instrument echoed from somewhere, the ding, ding, dong, growing louder, creeping into Fanny Mann's ears. How can there be music now? Who is playing an instrument? Fanny Mann wondered, feeling strange. Although the music sounded soothing, in this situation, it made her hair stand on end, as though the sound carried death with it, so terrifying. Ah! Victoria Nguyen ahead seemed to be affected by the music. She suddenly screamed in pain, then angrily grabbed the hairbrush and threw it away. Strands of thick black hair on her head were torn apart, revealing a horrifying bald head. Fanny Mann glanced at her and immediately couldn't bear it anymore, rushing into the corner of the hallway, vomiting. It felt like her stomach and intestines were being twisted with disgust. In the middle of her vomiting, Fanny Mann suddenly felt something moving behind her, followed by the pungent smell of decay, making her stomach twist again as though she had vomited everything, bile included. Fanny Mann leaned against the wall, her head spinning, feeling as though a thick cloud of black smoke enveloped her, and she could faint at any moment. As she turned around, she noticed Victoria Nguyen was leaning her head on her shoulder. Her face had no eyebrows, no eyes, no nose, no mouth, and now no hair either, making her appearance so grotesque it was beyond description. Fanny Mann, terrified, stepped back, swinging her hand to strike Victoria Nguyen's face before running for her life. Am I going to be harmed again? She caught a glimpse of doors and windows speeding by out of the corner of her eye. In her panic, Fanny Mann was startled to realize that she couldn't see any reflection of herself in the windows. This must be a dream, she assured herself with certainty. Everyone knows that dreams are essentially fragments of real-life experiences pieced together to form a coherent picture, but they have many limitations. Details like reflections, air currents, and real-time movement speed are often omitted in dreams, and that's the greatest flaw of dreams. No matter how real the dream may feel and how vivid the sensations can seem, it's still just a dream, a trap set before him. In the first dream, the lock was tightly shut, Now, perhaps only one or two locks remained. If she couldn't find a way to break these locks, Fanny Man might be trapped in this deadly loop, never returning to reality. It was like those in a vegetative state. Their hearts still beat, their blood still flows, but they cannot see the world around them. Their reality is even darker than that of the blind, imprisoned in hell, enduring brutal lashes, burning flames, yet unable to die or be freed. Their wounds heal faster than the speed of the lashes, forcing them to repeat the pain forever. Fanny Man was now walking that path. If she gave in to fear at this moment, it would mean surrendering herself. Reaching the end, it's a perpetual path. Fanny Man murmured, as if she had figured something out. Strange events that elderly people often mention began to surface in her mind, like a warning leading her to answers. Ancient legends no one can verify the truth of. Although no one dares to fully believe them, in this fabricated dream, anything is possible, like a ghostly wall. That's it, the ghostly wall, Fanny Man exclaimed, quickly observing the entire hallway. She knew this was just a dream, and the only path before her was to be caught by Victoria Nguyen, have her throat choked again, and fall into the endless loop. But this time, Fanny Man didn't want that to happen. She realized that she herself in this dream was the key to breaking the trap. Everyone knows that a key can not only open a lock, but also lock it again. The important thing is how you turn it, because the results are completely different. Fanny Man thought carefully and realized that the source of this dream might be Victoria Nguyen chasing her. Even if she defeated her, another Victoria Nguyen could appear, or a third one. Therefore, the only key was herself, but she couldn't let it fall into Victoria Nguyen's hands. She couldn't follow the preordained path, nor could she jump out of this building. Fanny Man recalled when she had dragged her luggage into Building 4 of the female dormitory. She had been in such a hurry that she didn't properly look around, just glancing at everything from the corner of her eye. That's why the world in front of her now felt like an incomplete picture, full of gaps. Fanny Man stopped, looked up at the bright full moon in the sky, and smiled slightly. Then she turned and looked at Victoria Nguyen, who was floating in the air, and said gently, "You've lost." And then she jumped off the floor, never looking back. "That's mine. Give it back to me." Victoria Nguyen screamed in rage, terrified, leaning against the railing. 2 streams of fresh blood gushed out from her face, which had no nose or mouth. Blood splattered everywhere, staining the cold hallway. At that moment, she resembled a fox chained up, forever imprisoned in the hallway. When Fanny Man opened her eyes again, she realized she was still standing in the hallway, with a dark corridor stretching ahead, leading to a blindingly bright light. Room 411. Fanny Man knew she had won in her dream, but what came next might not be as simple. Many people say that dreams are the remnants of silent thoughts in daily life. Some dreams are about longing for the departed, some dreams are about remorse for one's sins, and some are warnings about future dangers. Dreams always seem to have an invisible imagination, created by elements that aren't real. However, sometimes even though something is no longer relevant in reality, Fanny Man still felt that this dream was too strange, as if it were foretelling something. Fanny Man remembered when she was young, she had a nightmare where she found herself standing on a balcony, laughing foolishly, laughing non-stop, no matter how hard she shook her head. When she woke up, she cried for a long time. A month later, someone close to her jumped off a building and committed suicide. At that time, she was too young to view the incident as anything but a terrifying nightmare. But when she faced a similar situation again, that horrifying dream came back. She glanced up at the pitch-black sky. At that moment, the sky looked like a dark mountain, blocking out the moon, making it hard to breathe. Oppressive. The school where she stood, the art building, and several glossy black crows perched on the iron railings. Their cries echoed mournfully, adding to the feeling of sorrow. Among the crows, Fanny Man noticed one that was different from the rest, its eyes red as blood, like 2 drops of fresh blood stuck in its eye sockets. Fanny Man remembered clearly. That was the crow she had accidentally knocked to the ground with her bag earlier that afternoon. Now, those red eyes emitted a chilling cold from the night sky, as if some sort of magical force was guiding her step by step toward death. Fanny Man shook her head, trying to stay alert, even though she was still in a dream. Ahead, a faint white light flickered as if someone's shadow passed by. Should she go or not? Fanny Mann took a deep breath and finally decided to move forward. She comforted herself. It's just a level in a game, like Mario, nothing to be afraid of. Once I get through this level, I'll see the national flag flying. Though she thought that in her mind, saying she wasn't scared was a lie, as beads of cold sweat began to form on her forehead. Unconsciously, Fanny Mann found herself at the door of room 411. She let out a faint laugh. Why am I so silly? Ha ha! Without further delay, she pushed the door open. Inside, the room was quiet and warm, with a cozy little living room, the bed neatly made, the walls pristine white, and her two roommates waving at her from across the room. Fanny Mann, what are you thinking about? Hannah Lee waved her hand in front of Fanny Mann's face, furrowing her brow and gently asking. The other roommate looked at her curiously, whispering, Fanny Mann, where have you been? I missed you so much. I bought a lot of delicious food and was waiting for you. Looking at the two roommates in front of her like pure jewels, in their eyes there was not a speck of dust, their gazes as clear as crystal. It felt like meeting real deities. Had she returned to reality? When Fanny Mann opened her eyes again, she found herself still standing in the hallway, with a dark corridor ahead, leading to a blinding light. Room 411. Fanny Mann knew she had won in her dream, but what would follow might not be as simple. Many people say that dreams are remnants of silent thoughts in daily life. Some dreams are about longing for the departed, others are about regret for one's sins, and some serve as warnings of dangers to come. Dreams always seem to have invisible imagination, created by unreal elements. However, sometimes, even if something no longer matters in reality, Fanny Mann still felt that this dream was too strange, as if it were foretelling something. Fanny Mann remembered when she was young. She had a nightmare where she stood on a balcony, laughing foolishly, laughing endlessly, no matter how hard she shook her head. When she woke up, she cried for a long time. A month later, someone close to her jumped off a building and committed suicide. At that time, she was too young to view the incident as anything but a terrifying nightmare. But when she faced a similar situation again, that horrifying dream came back. She glanced up at the pitch-black sky. At that moment, the sky looked like a dark mountain, blocking out the moon, making it hard to breathe, suffocating. The school where she stood, the art building, and several glossy black crows perched on the iron railings. Their cries echoed mournfully, adding to the feeling of sorrow. Among the crows, Fanny Mann noticed one that was different from the rest. Its eyes red as blood, like 2 drops of fresh blood stuck in its eye sockets. Fanny Mann remembered clearly. That was the crow she had accidentally knocked to the ground with her bag earlier that afternoon. Now, those red eyes emitted a chilling cold from the night sky, as if some sort of magical force was guiding her step by step toward death. Fanny Mann shook her head, trying to stay alert, even though she was still in a dream. Ahead, a faint white light flickered as if someone's shadow passed by. Should she go or not? Fanny Mann took a deep breath and finally decided to move forward. She comforted herself. It's just a level in a game, like Mario, nothing to be afraid of. Once I get through this level, I'll see the national flag flying. Though she thought that in her mind, saying she wasn't scared was a lie, as beads of cold sweat began to form on her forehead. Unconsciously, Fanny Mann found herself at the door of room 411. She let out a faint laugh. Why am I so silly? Ha ha. Without further delay, she pushed the door open. Inside, the room was quiet and warm, with a cozy little living room, the bed neatly made, the walls pristine white, and her two roommates waving at her from across the room. Fanny Mann, what are you thinking about? Hannah Lee waved her hand in front of Fanny Mann's face, furrowing her brow and gently asking. The other roommate looked at her curiously, whispering, Fanny Mann, where have you been? I missed you so much. I bought a lot of delicious food and was waiting for you. Looking at the two roommates in front of her, like pure jewels, in their eyes there was not a speck of dust, their gazes as clear as crystal. It felt like meeting real deities. Had she returned to reality? Man, stop there! Fanny Mann shouted at Sophie Smith, but her voice seemed distant to Sophie, as if echoing from another world. stopping the strange exchange between her and the other person. "Your Majesty, do you think I am beautiful?" Sophie Smith unbuttoned each button, leaving only a piece of clothing, her eyes dazedly staring ahead at the building while giggling softly. Fanny Mann suddenly realized something, reached out to grab Sophie Smith's hand, but it was too late. Sophie Smith only managed to mutter, "Disgusting," before jumping off the tall building, followed by a loud boom. Looking at the one shoe of Sophie Smith that she had managed to grab, Fanny Mann stood still, her tears instantly blurring her vision. The memory of the sorrow from years ago when someone jumped off a building rushed back to her. Her heart felt like it was breaking, a pain so hard to forget in life, even though she was just dreaming now. Why do I have to endure this never-ending nightmare again? Fanny Mann muttered, sitting down on the floor, curling up, her hands trembling, terrified, and her eyes full of confusion. She wasn't sure how much time passed, but eventually, Fanny Mann managed to break free from the recent horror. She suddenly realized how unusually quiet everything had become. Sensing something very strange, Sophie Smith had jumped off the building, and although her two roommates hadn't seen it, they must have heard her scream earlier, right? Could it be? Fanny Mann slowly turned her gaze toward the bedroom, but she noticed a piece of silk rope appearing in the middle of the living room, tied to the spinning ceiling fan. Before she could think it through, she saw Hannah Lee and Victoria Nguyen whispering something to each other mysteriously. When they realized Fanny Mann was watching them, Victoria Nguyen suddenly let out a shrill scream, and her face immediately distorted. Her features fell off, revealing a horrific face with no skin. Clearly, this was a sign that she was going to hang herself. Fanny Mann's heart raced in her throat, and she gasped for air, struggling to stay calm, reminding herself to carefully analyze how to escape from this nightmare. Now, she was faced with a difficult choice between evil spirits and an invisible abyss. The option of jumping off the building was no longer possible, as Sophie Smith had just jumped, and that route was clearly blocked, so she abandoned the idea. What's the gap this time? Fanny Mann pressed her forehead, trying to remember everything from the moment she entered this dorm room up to now. Her instincts told her the answer was still in this room or between the three others. Originally 4, now 1 is gone, leaving only 3. Fanny Mann tried to piece together the incomplete information, attempting to connect the dots. 4 people, now only 3. She repeated again, trying to forget the terrifying scene of Victoria Nguyen with her neck twisted at a 45-degree angle, making a crackling sound. The order of death, yes, why one of them first and not? Fanny Mann seemed to have figured something out. Her tense expression suddenly softened, a hint of joy appearing on her face. Grasping this point, Fanny Mann felt as though she had found a lifeline. She felt relieved and began slowly analyzing each layer of the situation. Fanny Mann thought, if she had 4 cards, numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, then Sophie Smith would be number 1, and she herself would be number 2. Since there was a silk rope hanging in the room, it was undeniable that it had been prepared for her. The remaining cards, number 3 and 4, represented Hannah Lee and Victoria Nguyen. She remembered a male teacher in the office had said that 4 years ago, in room 4111 of the dormitory, there were 4 female students, all of whom encountered strange events. 3 of them passed away, and only 1 remained. This meant that what she was experiencing now could be a replica of what had happened in room 411. It was clear that out of the 4, 3 would die. Since 1 had already passed, it meant that there was still 1 person who had to die. That person had to be either Hannah Lee or Victoria Nguyen. These cards can be arranged in the order of 1342, 1432, 1324, or 1423. Fanny Mann said, looking at Victoria Nguyen and Hannah Lee, smiling faintly. Why arrange them in any particular order? That's right, the answer this time is not following the usual order. Fanny Mann concluded confidently. But how to make the 3rd or 4th person leave first was still a question. Fanny Mann immediately thought of one of the most devious strategies in the 36 strategies, the strategy of sowing discord. On the other side, Hannah Lee, like an evil spirit, noticed the change in Fanny Mann, narrowing her eyes into a sharp line, resembling the eyes of a cunning fox, full of murderous intent. Victoria, do you think she knows that I have obtained the priceless treasure that the Emperor gave me? What if she knows? Isn't she going to die anyway? Victoria and Gwen spoke with malicious intent, immediately grabbing the silk rope beside her. Hang her? The Emperor? The priceless treasure? That's insane. At this moment, Fanny Man was no longer frightened by their terrifying appearance. Instead, her mind was busy formulating her plan to sow discord, analyzing the important words she had just heard. Seeing the tense mental state of the two, Fanny Man coldly said, Victoria, you know that Hannah Lee has the treasure the Emperor gave her, but she will never give it to you. Moreover, to become the ruler of the harem, she will kill anyone who knows this secret, including you, right, Hannah Lee? Hannah Lee froze at hearing this, her eyes darting back and forth, clearly struck by Fanny Man's words. You said you would kill her and give the treasure to me. Are you really deceiving me? Victoria Nguyen suddenly understood something, and in a fit of anger, she grabbed Hannah Lee's arm and shook it violently, her sharp nails scraping into Hannah Lee's skin, causing blood to spill out. Suddenly, Hannah Lee pushed Victoria Nguyen away, furiously saying, Yes, I am deceiving you. I will never give you the treasure. Get rid of your hope. You will never have it, and you will never win the Emperor's favor. Ha! I am the Empress of you all. Ha! Fanny Man frowned as she watched her two roommates fighting. While she felt 1,000 joys watching the two enemies destroy each other, she had to stop. She silently promised that in real life, she would never let this happen. She would definitely save them. The world was too cruel, and many people would stop at nothing for fame and fortune, even selling out family and friends. Even evil spirits couldn't escape the vortex of interest, and their rule was that only the strong survived. Hannah Lee, if I'm not mistaken, that important treasure, you didn't leave it in the palace because you were afraid the maids would find it. That treasure must always be with you, right? Hannah Lee glared at Fanny Man, but before she could blink, Victoria Nguyen lunged at her, knocking her to the ground. The two of them engaged in a fierce fight, tearing into each other. Hannah Lee's face immediately turned into a hideous one covered in boils, and they kept fighting, struggling with each other. In that moment, blood splattered everywhere. The screams and wails echoed, creating a scene like the gates of hell opening, with countless evil spirits flying out, bringing with them a thick black smoke and tiny sparks, heading toward the black vortex in the sky. Boom! The bell from the art building suddenly rang, and the crows on the rooftop flapped their wings and flew away. Fanny Man knew that this nightmare was about to end. The scene around her began to disintegrate. The dorm room, Victoria Nguyen, Hannah Lee, all of it turned into ashes, burned and scattered in the air before disappearing. Fanny Man also began to feel a wave of sleepiness take over. She slowly closed her eyes, falling into a deep sleep.